All right, happy Friday. It is the last word presented by Chrisman Commentary. What a week, what a week, what a week. So I'll start with the opening to a LinkedIn post I did earlier today. I said layoffs, lawsuits, allegations, market pressures. If you spent even 5 minutes scrolling, it was easy to feel like the sky was falling. That was the opening to my post this morning, and there's a lot going on, and it's fluid, right? Before we hit record, we're learning that some of the news with the CFPB and the layoffs is maybe getting held up a little bit, but there's a lot to cover, guys. And first off, it's Friday. It's Good Friday. We've got Easter weekend upon us. I think spring is trying to spring everywhere, even here in the Mitten State, and just good to be with you guys again.
Well, I like that you wore spring colors.
Yeah, got my Easter pink on.
I just stick with black, but I applaud your pink, Brian.
Thank you.
It's better than a white furry blanket. That's all I got to say.
We'll leave that to your imagination, audience.
We digress.
Yeah, we just got off of a gym pump session, Body by Robbie. So now we're all fired up.
Yesterday we had. I'm going to bring us back to topic. Yesterday we had an Easter egg hunt here in the office. We had our monthly mortgage. We call it the M3 meeting, and the team went to great lengths to hide 200 Easter eggs all over the mortgage department. And they had cool prizes in them, like rush and close fast and
tangibles,
pricing exceptions and other cool things that you could get in your golden Easter eggs. So it was a lot of fun.
They weren't Taylor Swift themed Easter eggs then.
They were not. They were mortgage eggs.
The Easter Bunny is alive and well in Austin, you're saying?
The Easter Bunny is alive and well. You got to have a little bit of fun. And then we had a realtor education event later in the evening where we get to hear lots of people's Easter plans. It's going to be a fun weekend for many folks here.
That's awesome. I have back-to-back weeks this week and next week going to our nation's capital. And this week I got to gather with what I would call the titans of the servicing industry at the Hay Adams. Thanks to Ed Delgado for that. Learned a lot about what's going on. Learned that we now call climate risk weather risk. Learned a little bit about that and some of the data that's available there, and whether or not people are using it is a big question. The answer is not yet, according to a lot. And then back next week for more, in theory, town appropriate commentary for Total Mortgage. So looking forward to that.
We had Account Executive University. It's arguably the best onboarding for wholesale and correspondent AEs in the business. We still believe in the old school AEs, relationships, structuring deals. I had 3 great people in, and then I met a team late yesterday, a new retail team that joined our retail channel, and they didn't travel. So it was nice. And I got to tell you, it was really weird cutting my Thursday video like around 4:30 in the afternoon. I'm telling you, people are like definitely taking this as a 3-day weekend. Like people are chilling. I mean, dude, I was caught up on email by like 9:15 this morning. And, I read some stupid Orange County magazine. It was like Botox ad after Botox doctor after facelift doctor. And I'm just like, God, I'm from Garland, Texas, if you've seen King of the Hill. So anyway, getting ready for a semi 3-day weekend here for Easter.
I love it. So guys, let's start with where do we start? I don't even know where to start. I'm gonna go into the Easter egg basket and just start pulling out some Easter eggs. Let's start with the Ohio AG and the lawsuit initiated against United Wholesale Mortgage, UWM. That was like my text thread DM thread yesterday afternoon into the evening was, there's 3 sides to every story, as they say, maybe 4. And so I think I had like 4 different threads going on, but just would love to start with that news, and not so much, picking on anybody in the news, but just the implications of something like this for lenders of all sizes out there. Who wants to start?
Ladies first.
I say this is such an interesting topic. And having been a broker in the beginning of my career, when I opened my first company, it was a mortgage broker shop that went to that went to delegated correspondent eventually, but started out as a mortgage broker. And I always thought it was my fiduciary responsibility, regardless of the law, to represent the borrower and with other lenders and give them what is, best is a relative term. It's not necessarily the lowest rate, because the lowest rate could be something you couldn't obtain. It could be a product that doesn't serve your needs, whatever that is. But I felt like I had a fiduciary responsibility, however you define that, to the borrower. And that seems to be the crux of the question here, is where does the fiduciary responsibility fall, regardless of the law? And how does that get interpreted in our world today?
I would like to salt and pepper Christy's comments. And I would take it to another level of responsibility, being, I think, the only fake lawyer on this panel. I think that one of the things that I learned growing up in a great real estate law firm in the Metro Detroit area, where companies like UWM and Quicken came of age and things like that, is that clients tend to hire lawyers that are like themselves, right? And I think that you're right, Brian. I think that there's probably 3 different sides to this story, maybe 3,000 different sides of the story, depending upon, who's participating. But I think that UWM is very, very clear about what type of business that it does. And I think that it does attract, certain groups of people effectively or not effectively. But I don't know if those choosing to participate in the type of business that UWM ultimately wants to run can say that they've been tricked or didn't understand, or, any of the agreements that they might have otherwise had with the company. And I think that that's an important question. I think that I feel like time and time again, when I'm here, I end up defaulting to, when I listen to you all, there's personal responsibility at the end of this. From a broader legal perspective, I'm a fake lawyer. I do not represent anybody. Nobody has paid me to, give my legal opinions here. It reminds me a lot of certain states that used to cramp down on LO compensation like 15, 20 years ago, where there were mortgage companies at the time, some of them my clients, who were considering pulling their business out of certain states because of how the state was treating, certain types of agreements and certain types of compensation, because ultimately it was too hard to do business there, right? And I think that when we get back to, we're going to talk about the CFPB here today, but when we're getting back to state regulated stuff, when you think about broader restraint on trade and what that does to businesses and where businesses choose to have a footprint, I think that no matter what side you land on the UWM thing, right? I think that Ohio's telling us something, right? In mortgage land, and you would be silly not to keep up with it and see where it goes.
I have an interesting take on it. Obviously, we have a wholesale channel. I have a lot of respect for United Wholesale. I consider Ish a friend, and they built a really good technology platform. And, I'll just say that, people have been trying to copy their tech offering and some of the things they've been doing since they, made a run at this, single channel. And so, even if someone's a non-delegated correspondent with UWM, they don't draw their own docs. They draw the docs in that system. And so, some people will kind of continue to graduate as a TPO client, third-party originator, and go even further, like Christy just said, and make their way into actually drawing their own docs and then possibly even getting into delegated. But for those that stop and pause in that model, They're really good. They're the best. They're number one. And so when you're number one, you're a big target. You're the biggest target. And every time I see a state action, I just think money grab. And it's probably a money grab. I was actually surprised. I think the lawsuit said it was like 500 million in loans, something like that.
I don't even know if it was that high.
I didn't think that was that high. I would have thought
I think the number was even lower than that.
I think like overall it was 500 in like last year is in the 200s or something like that or whatever.
Yeah.
But I actually thought the number would have been higher. I mean, they did like what 132 billion last year, some crazy number.
Yeah.
So this is not something that I think the CFPB would have gone after. So if people are saying here's evidence of the states going da 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 da, I think there's more to it. And if I were to put my conspiracy theory hat on, you guys up in Michigan, you in Ohio, you've always been like this. And you probably got some Ohio lenders up there that might be in the ear of this regulator going, man, it's just not fair. They're doing this.
And there is an interesting ownership interest in the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think you're onto something here, KP. I think.
Yeah. I wouldn't even go in there. I was thinking
it's a broader sports-based conspiracy theory here.
There's a couple big companies based in Cleveland, a couple big mortgage companies based in Cleveland too that might have an opinion.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the independent mortgage bankers that that aren't competitive with that model, and they feel like Ohioans and Ohio business is getting raided into Michigan. And I don't know the dynamics and the politics of the state of Ohio, but pretty much any state that comes out, it's usually becomes a money grab. And so wouldn't be surprised if there are some people in Ohio that are saying, man, get these guys out of here. They're unfair practices. Haven't you seen what they did? I'm not saying that's what happened, and I'm not saying who it was. I was actually thinking more the independent mortgage bankers, not Rocket. Rocket's massive on their own. And Michigan based, by the way.
Brian, to give KP a quick history on the war over the Toledo Strip and how we acquired the UP here in Michigan. And I don't know. I think that there's a lot of things that we can tie back through here, KP. I like this. I like where this is going. There's a broader thing. There's a web here. It's a web of Ohio versus Michigan lies.
It's just a money grab. I mean, they're going to settle. It's not going to go all the way to court. Although, if there are two people that would take regulators all the way to the hilt, it would be Matt Ishbia and Dan Gilbert. And if you guys remember the False Claims Act, when Rocket was being sued, everyone in the NBA was like, please take them all the way to the end and end this nonsense bullshit money grab on a Civil War era law that you're using to sue us for FHA loans. I mean, give me a break, and then they ended up settling at Rocket, and we were like, oh man, now we all got to settle, right? And so it'll be interesting. Ish is a winner, just like they won the UP. So my money's on Ish.
Yeah, I think some of the conversations I had over the last 24 hours were with much smaller players in the industry, some of which sell to UWM and some to others. And I've always kind of thought of it this way. This goes back to, KP, when I kind of sat in your chair, working with all these counterparties. At the end of the day, each of these individual, independent mortgage companies need to really look out for themselves and make sure that their practices, to Christy's opening point on this, that they have the practices in place and they're following practices that represent, operating in the best interest of the consumer. And it doesn't mean that loans shouldn't go or should go to XYZ mortgage company, but you just have to as an independent mortgage broker, you just have to make sure your stuff is buttoned up and you've got defendable processes in place.
Let me get some details on that, because that's very prescient in wise guidance. We have some mega brokers around the country. Last year, a couple were pegged for doing the 1099 versus W-2 on their employees. And I think generally, if someone put a gun to your head, what do you say you're supposed to do? It's W-2. And so the 1099 thing, I think, is going to continue to put pressure on again, regulators go after mega brokers, just like Ohio's going after the number one lender in America because they have the money.
Yeah.
But what I'll caution as it relates to anti-steering and the disclosure, and I'll dig just a little deep here for about 30 seconds. That anti-steering disclosure is a very finable disclosure. I mean, if you look at every regulator, they're all really disclosure regimes. You look at the SEC, you look at the FTC, it's, are you disclosing? Are you disclosing that Bitcoin is an actual financial instrument? Are you disclosing that you are, actually pricing this out with multiple options? And, one thing we've told our account executives is, there's a practice that goes on out there, and we just, we're not, jerks about it, but, some people put, my wholesale or correspondent channel to 275 comp plan, and they go put another lender at 150. So who looks better? You know what I mean? And so that will absolutely come up in, in a state audit or whatever the case may be. Why are you taxing this one? Oh, well, the system's so much better at this lender. So, is it that much better? We have a new portal right now. I just got feedback on it that our portal is arguably one of the best, if not the best in the business for our wholesale channel. So, we're not going to go around and go put us at a low comp plan and everyone else at a higher comp plan. And so then you got non-del cores that also have hidden margin to tax it even worse. So my pricing looks, which, Gary Malice is a very seasoned cap markets executive. Our pricing is legit, but we look like shit if someone steers into another lender. And if people start to get fined, the playing field is going to get leveled. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this.
For
Brian,
sure.
you brought up, or KP, we're talking about, well, is this grabbed by the states because of what's going on with the CFPB? So if we switch into that conversation, and this may or may not be, let's assume that it's not, since a lot of the stuff with the CFPB didn't happen until right after this was announced. It's, Brian, I think you're over generous in saying, hey, all this happened over the last week. I feel like it's every 5 minutes you're looking something different is happening and changing. And you had the memo that came out from the CFPB that said they were going to change their thought process on audits and who they're going to audit, along with a myriad of other things. And then, let's call it a couple of hours afterwards, they came out and said that they were going to let go, 1,500 roughly employees. And then just right before this show, now we have a court order that says, hey, halt, stop, cease and desist. Let's keep the folks in place while we think through this a little more thoughtfully. So where do we think regulation is going to go? How do we think that this changes with the CFPB are going to impact what we have and how the state regulators look at it?
I think
I was going to say, no, you're up. I was trying to let you go, but you didn't go, so I didn't know if you weren't going.
I was trying to make sure nobody wanted to take it way back. But I was just going to say, until we dispose of actual laws that are on the books, like some of the rules that came out post Dodd-Frank, from my perspective, despite the fact that there might be less enforcement activities, less audit activities coming out of DC, all of the laws and the entire framework is still in place that individual institutions have to be compliant now with existing consumer financial protection law, and the mechanism by which any enforcement agency, any group at any time looks at this is through what is called a look back. It was born in the hottest and heaviest version in this, Dodd-Frank era. It's still codified. The statute of limitations is tied to discovery. Statute of limitations is how long you can take to bring an enforcement action against a thing. If the CFPB sits dormant and does nothing for 4 years, and then 5 years from now, Elizabeth Warren becomes president. See, look at me in hyperbole, right? And every financial institution in the country gets put into an investigation. They can look at every single year that happened now, and their time period for filing a lawsuit against you for doing those bad things begins tolling the day they find something wrong.
Right.
And so,
it's an Easter egg. It's an Easter egg in the law.
Woo, we're going back to it's a Cadbury egg with the white sugary stuff with the goo in the middle. I just feel like the framework is there. Companies are going to choose how companies want to operate in this period. I would say use this period to innovate, try new things, do more digital, come up with more creative solutions, right? Because you are going to have a little bit more time because there's not going to be so many people in your house checking out whether your drawers are, folded appropriately and things like that. But until, I still am, my 401k is up and down and every day, just like everybody else's, but I'm still wait and see on a lot of these issues, right? Until I would say we see military force over, making things happen in an executive orderdom, which is not the subject of this podcast, or we see laws being unwritten in the books, right? Where these things don't exist anymore because there's an entire framework for the ongoing enforcement of consumer financial protection law. And if you think that there's not, or that it's not you, I don't know. I feel like that's dangerous. We're going to switch to depositories for a couple of years. We'll be back in, non-depositories, it's just the nature of how this country has operated for the last, I can't do this fast of math, 250 years, 1770. I don't know.
248. It's pretty much my age. July 4th will be 249.
Whoa, look at that. I will never forget that. Yeah. So we're almost there, guys. And mortgages were one of the reasons, property ownership, founding principle of why we were here. This business has been here since the beginning. I will just say that this is a very state specific issue, protecting Ohioans from a practice. And so this is not a case that the CFPB would take up. So this is a state driven lawsuit protecting Ohioans. Now, as it relates to CFPB, they typically look back about 7 years. That's pretty much, I think, all any of us need to keep our records. So delete everything, archive everything, tell them I don't have it, sorry. So they can't go back more than 7 years. But this is only 4 years with a laissez-faire, hands-off CFPB. So in 5 years, depending on if we have another, gotcha type CFPB, what we do in the next 4 years can be looked into. I will say our experience at PRMG, we had a fair lending exam, and we passed, by the way, and no material findings. I will do quarterly follow-ups, they were just looking, this last administration was looking for, like hum the data. Are you giving price exceptions to white people, and then all the minorities are not getting price exceptions? Therefore, you're a bad lender. And we passed, by the way. And so I will say, like, the CFPB was very professional to deal with those employees. I know they get a bad rap because they look for headlines and they try and hunt for money, and that's where they put their PR. And so kind of their own worst enemy. But it's still a shame that 1,400 people got let go yesterday abruptly. I don't know if they were given 60 days warning. I don't know if, being a government entity, that they have to give 60 days warning and comply with the Warren Act. I don't know what the legalities is there. I know that there's already a lawsuit saying you can't fire, and they fired anyway, which sets up a battle between the executive and judicial branch. It'd be interesting to see, does the executive branch have the right to run their own agencies, or do they have to have a court tell them how to employ people or not employ people? And so, that's more heavy-handed than the lovely state of California, when we have to let go of people, which we've never done a mass firing that qualified under the Warren Act, for the record. So I'll say, the CFPB being gutted down to 300 people, we know there are some people behind the scenes that are LFG. They want less federal government, and they want to streamline that operation. And there's also a culture shift, and elections have consequences. And if the culture there is perceived by this administration and its new leadership not to be the one that they want at the CFPB, that doesn't mean that they're not trying to enforce, and go after bad actors. They just may not like the way it was done the last 4 years. And so if I bought a company or took over a company or overwhelmingly was elected to run a company, anyone, that doesn't fit my company's culture, they're out. And so every one of us would run our business the same way. And we'd like to run a profitable business. I don't know if the 1,700 employees were profitable. By the way, it's our money. So I don't know if it was a profitable venture. I don't know if they got that $8 billion or $6 billion or whatever they tagged for all the bank fees. I don't know if they got that, then they're probably profitable. So I don't know all the details, but I sure hope those people got
treated fairly, got severance packages and fine jobs.
Whew. And that's
We
just
talk-
two of
we-
that's only
we
two
talk
of the
about
things
China.
that happened all week.
We talk about China.
We'll leave that to somebody else. So let's shift to maybe more forward thinking, right? This is typically one of the Masters to me is the traditional sign of spring, right? So we had the Masters last week. Go Rory! Finally got the career Grand Slam. Good for him. To me, this is like the signal sign of spring is here. The purchase season's kicking in. I know it's been kind of kicked in for a bit, but are we, Courtney, Christy, KP, and your companies, are you guys starting to see some signs of growth from a purchase business activity perspective, absent the brief drop in rates last week?
We are.
Yes.
Like the answer is yes. I think that the consumer is amazingly resilient, and there is still interest in home ownership. The spring weather is I want to say sort of here. I was in DC with KP. It was 31 degrees. That's not spring, in my opinion. I mean, maybe if you live at the North Pole, I don't know.
The cherry blossoms, they were peeking out.
Yeah.
They had run back up. They had run back for cover. They were like, "No, we're not hanging out with you." It was like
the bond market was a head fake. Look at all these stocks up. Just kidding. 10-year back up to 460.
Well,
I was thinking more like George Costanza when he jumped in the lake.
I was in the water.
I just think it's hard for the consumer though when they look at that and they look at the interest rates. We were having this conversation in another call today where we were talking about, well, is the Freddie Mac survey rate doing more harm than good today? Like, should they quit publishing that when we can't know from this minute to the time we get off this call where the market's going to be?
The tariff talk is doing the most harm. The sentiment data just flat out shows that people are freaked out. And it's our job to communicate that it's a great time to buy. And I'll say this like I've said every year. This is now your third to last best good chance to buy. Right. At the end of 22 and then 23 and 20, maybe your fourth last best good chance to buy. There are no homes for sale. And when you see the rate dip down and you get under 6.5%, it is a mad rush and the system is overwhelmed and turn times are backed up and there are not enough homes for sale. And so the Fed knows that, by the way. They don't want to cut rates. They're still trying to let this backlog of owner's equivalent rent and house price appreciation, they still want to come down a little bit more. So inflation data is at their 2% target, even though it's at 2.4% core PCE for 40 years, which is, by the way, where we're at today. They could cut a quarter right now, no problem. Give some people some relief, but they're holding back. And so, Christy, to your point, borrowers are holding back because they're uncertain. But we're still busy. We're getting tons of business.
KP, you've talked about it time and time again. Diapers, divorce, death, diplomas. Deployment. Life events are still occurring, and it's why I moved. It's why I bought a house and then put a house on the market. We're seeing inventory increase, so that is definitely, local.
What's that D for you? Was that depository?
Depository. No. What is it when you call it when you get a new job? I don't know. That's not. You got to come up with a name for that one.
Displacement.
Transfer with a D.
Whatever that is. But life is still happening and you're still seeing people make decisions because of that. And the joy of folks that when they purchase a home hasn't diminished at all. And I'm talking to the person who, talking to the people who are out buying homes and meeting with real estate agents in the communities. It hasn't changed.
I think we should give Tony Valencia the last word, Brian.
I know, that's pretty good. But let's put TV.
If you want to buy a house, go buy a damn house. Educate.
Yeah, that's so good.
One of the client needs. I think that I don't think we can do better than that. I
No,
think,
Robbie said
Cody wins.
departure, defection.
There you go. See, we'll come up with more D words between now and next Friday.
People are buying houses. It ain't stopping. They're not stopping.
It's definitely encouraging to see, local business, local markets kind of have good activity. Guys, KP, I know you want to get on to onto that pseudo long weekend. Christy, Courtney, have a great Easter weekend. And for the audience, thanks for tuning in this Good Friday. And we'll see you back next Friday on The Last Word, presented by Chrisman Commentary. Thanks, guys.
Happy Easter, guys.
Happy Easter. Good Friday.